Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karunya Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhya Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasu Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramajanado Jukta Sabaktam Sa Niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Kridvaiva Tripti Vajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shirari Kama Dabayara Para Madhura Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Sa Danalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Ne kunja yono rati kerisidai jajali bhir jokti apekshaniya rati kerisidai jajali bhir jokti tatrati daksha atibalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam. Sakshadharidvena Shamasta Shashre Ruktastatthava Vyataiva Sadhavi. Kintu Pravarja Priya eva tasya Vande Gorashi Charanaravrindam. Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasada Yasya prasadam Nagati kutapi. Jayam stubham tasya yasatri sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine. Oh, Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta. Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachata Deshatarine. Namaste Deve Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachata Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, oh, Hare Krishna, oh, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, oh, Hare Rama, oh, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Haribo. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Hariyaraye Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah Gopal Govindaram Srimadhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Shri Radha, Nila Madhava, Radha, Nila Madhava, Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Gaura Pramanande Haribo. Jai Vishnu Paraparamita Prabhajakacharya. Astotara Sarasi Shemari Juvan Grace. Abhacharmina Bhakti Viranta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapakachar Vaishnav Siromani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhar ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhattara Gunata Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji ki jai. Ananta Kuti Vaishnav Vrind ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिनंदन स्मन गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावरन अवतार की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय। जोग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहदांग सेव की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपना राधा कुंज समकुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय। दिलोश श्री राधा नीलमाधव की जय। श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय। परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम चित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमद सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर श्रृंगरे भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय। जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी देवी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौरी प्रमानंद। All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः शीलटङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहाय बहिर्नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरेणकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रहलाद महाराज निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
जय की जय हरि हरि बोल देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति सर्वदेवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः
Namo Nama Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Nama Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Nama Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Eya Bilasi Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Eya Bilasi Jetso Mara Sharanaloy Tara Vansha Purnahoy Kripa Kori Korotare Vrindavanavasi Moraya Vilas Vilas Kunjeri Avar Nayane Heri Bosada Jugala Ruparasi Hey Nivedana Daro Sakir Anugata Koro Seva Adhikara Diye Koro Nijadasi Dina Krishna Dase Koi Eye Namora Hoi Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadaya Navasi Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadaya Navasi Yani Kani Chapa Pani Brahmatyati Kani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Yani Kani Chapa Pani Brahmatyati Kani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Yani Kani Chapa Pani Brahmatyati Kani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani. Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo.
Yakari Vachandika Vitarana Vidyavati Ananda Nirivardhanam Giripadam Punam Dasvanam Sarvamanam Param Videshi Krishna Sankirtanam Namari Vandani Jatavati Shakti Tatragara Yanda Smarinatara Jeta Vishi Tavataka Gavanamati Thank you. extinguishes the fire of conditional life for repeated birth and death. His sanctital moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large. God is spreads the waves of benediction moment. It's the life of all transcendent knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully test the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have rendered the communities of men by the wish of your will. In these transcendental names, you've invested glory to transcendental energies. There's no even hard and fast rules to chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction to them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, think oneself the Lord and store in sleep. I should be more tolerant than the truth, devoid of all sense of false prestige. I should be ready to offer respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to be well well, nor do I desire to be wonderful, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cosmos that was to save us from birth after birth. O Son of Maharaja and Krishna, I am your eternal servant. Yes, somehow I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me in the arms of the Holy Spirit. O my Lord, open my eyes with really great tears of love, and only constantly may I chant your holy name. Open my voice choke up, and with the hairs of my body stand on end, there is suggesting your name. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm constantly moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all the dangers in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he should remain so even if hundreds of ratifications and grace. All makes me broken hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, but he knows my worshipful Lord and Shri 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 Krishna Ki. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting your holy name the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Praise and glory, praise very life, or forgetting the holy name of the Lord. 2. Use the name of the God of the Lord Shiva, Brahma, people who are friends with the Lord Vishnu. 3. Use the spirit of all of the spirits in the ask. 4. Realize the Vedic glory to our Lord as we pursue the Vedic glory. 5. Constantly morning chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. 6. Give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit simple activities in strength of chanting the name of the Lord. 8. Constantly chanting Hare Krishna is one of the auspicious ritualistic activities of Japa leaders with activity karma plan. 9. Construct the fearless person by the glories of the holy name. And 10. To have complete faith in chanting the holy names and eliminate material attachments, even understanding so many instructions of this matter. It's also an offense in the sense for chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully address these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve desire success. Krishna Prema. Now let us put our respectful for the system for all the Vaishnavas who worship the Lord. They are just like scientists. They can fulfill the desires of the Lord. And they have pure compassion for the fallen conditions.
Vanchakilpatarabhishya Prasthurabhishya Patitanam Pavanam Vaishnava Thakur. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmat yasya yato nivayat itaratascha desvavigyaswarat tene brahma hridaya adhikavaye niyanti yat suryaha nijo varimidam yata vinimaya yatra trisargo misha Damna Srina Sadani Rasta Kuhakam Satyam Paranti Mahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes. of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge onto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed in illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma projita kaitravocha, paramo nivatsaranam satam, vedyam vastavam atravastu, shivadam tapa trayon bulanam. Srimad Bhagavati Srimad Bhagavati completely reject all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam, sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam, pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam, muhur aho raska bhuvibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Shenvatam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridyam Taksto Hibadani, Vidunati Suhit Satam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nasta presu abhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Tadarajas tamo bhava kamalobadayaschaye cheta itara navidam stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis Chidyante Sarvasamsaya Shiyante Chasyakarmani Drista Evatmanishware. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food. Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms.
The spiritual master is eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms.
The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana.
The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal
For my most humble obeisance, unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Raja Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Chintamani Prakasat Masukalpavriksha Laksha Brite Susrabirabipaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Khanantam Aravinda Dalayataksham Varhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandrika Lasadvanavaya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shyamam Tribangalaritaniyata Prakasam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalandriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sadurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam Supyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tattve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagananda Kotim Yachaktirasti Jagananda Chaya Danta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Subtarnyameva Nikama Pratitaistuvanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Verse number 34. Varsapuga Sahasrante Tadandam Udake Sayam Kala Karma Swabhavasto Jivo Jivam Ajivayat. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thus all the universes remain thousands of aeons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of all living beings, entering each of them, caused them to be fully animated. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord is described here as the Jiva because He is the leader of all other Jivas, or living entities. In the Vedas, He is described as the Nitya, the leader of all other Nityas, meaning eternals. The Lord's relation with the living entities is like that of the Father with the sons. The sons and the Father are qualitatively equal, but the Father is never the Son, nor is the Son ever the Father who begets them. So, as described above, the Lord as Garbhodakshay Vishnu, or Hiranyagarbha, Supersoul, enters into each and every universe and causes it to be animated by begetting the living entities within the womb of the material nature, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 14.3. After each annihilation of the material creation, all the living entities are merged within the body of the Lord, and after creation they are again impregnated within the material energy. In material existence, therefore, the material energy is seemingly the mother of the living entities, and the Lord is the father. When, however, the animation takes place, the living entities revive their own natural activities under the spell of time and energy, and thus the varieties of living beings are manifested. The Lord, therefore, is ultimately the cause of all animation in the material world. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thus all the universes remain thousands of aeons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of living beings, entering in each of them, caused them to be fully animated. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is a continuation of understanding how the material creation takes place. And it's progressive, and each step with all its minutiae are explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's no other place where such a thorough explanation of the material creation has ever been written or chronicled or in any way spoken. You can only find this information in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, there's no other scripture that's comparable to the Srimad Bhagavatam, because there's no other scripture that has such detailed information about the creation of the material world, nor does it have any other scripture have such detailed information of the spiritual world. So in both ways, Srimad Bhagavatam is superior to any other scripture. It is called the Amala Purana, in which Amala means no mistakes. There are no mistakes in this Purana, whereas there are many mistakes in the Bible, in the Quran, in the Granth Sahib, in the Jain scriptures, and so forth. When I say many, like for example, in the Bible, most of the Bible is the history of the Jewish people. And in that history, there are some good and bad things. Well, but when it comes to the creation, it's like 1 or 2 chapters of 1.5 chapters of the Old Testament, whereas here we see when we're talking about the creation, it goes into great depth and great, let's say, details. So, if you want to know actually what is what, or the actual facts about the creation of the material world, and that's not the only thing explained. The creation of the material world and the bewilderment of living entities is explained in detail, and the way to get out of that bewilderment and go back to Godhead is also explained in great detail, much more detailed than in any other scripture. So the more information we have, the more enlightened we become, if the information is bona fide. But the more fake information we have, the more we become bewildered, because we're being misled by purposely false statements. So there are no false statements. That's why the Srimad Bhagavatam is called Amala Purana. There are no mistakes in it. So this is further explained in the Bhagavad Gita in very great detail. But first of all, I want to make one point that's very interesting that I noticed today. In the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, one time I was speaking to a person who claims to be a devotee of some kind, and he told me, because he was a staunch so-called devotee of Lord Ramachandra, and he told me that the only statement that the Vaishnavas have to prove that Krishna is the Supreme Personality Godhead is Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse number 28. And he said, that's it. And that's not spoken in the 4 original Vedas. It's not spoken in the, as he said, in the Shruti. It's only spoken in the Smriti statements, and that's a statement by Sukadeva Goswami. Well, he doesn't know Shastra, because Bhagavad Gita, 11th chapter, verse 46, says, O universal form, O thousand-armed Lord, I wish to see you in your 4-armed form, with helmeted head and with club, wheel, conch, and lotus flower in your hands. I long to see you in that form. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, in the Brahma Samhita 5.39, it is stated, Ramadi Murtisu Kalanyamena Tistam. The Lord is eternally situated in hundreds and thousands of forms, and the main forms are those like Rama, Nishinga, and Narayana, etc. There are innumerable forms, but Arjuna knew that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, assuming his temporary universal form. He is now asking to see the form of Narayana, a spiritual form. This verse establishes without any doubt the statement of the Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead and all other features originate from him. He is not different from his plenary expansions, and he is God in any of his innumerable forms. In all of these forms, he is fresh like a young man. That is the constant feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who knows Krishna becomes free at once from all contamination of the material world. So this verse, spoken by Krishna himself about himself, confirms the statement, or validates the statement by Sukadeva Goswami. Ete jamsak kalak pumsak Krishna stu bhagavan swayam indriyari vyakulam lokam mridayanti yuge yuge. That Krishna is the fountainhead or the source of all other incarnations. And there are infinite incarnations and expansions of Krishna, and they're all the same absolute Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, that debunks this so-called Ram Bhakta's statement, because people like him always want to make statements that belittle Krishna and amplifies something else in place of Krishna. So we're going to be faced with this all the time. There are all kinds of nonsense people. Just like one time some nonsense person came into the temple and wanted to see me. And when he saw me, he said, I have something very important for you. And he took out a big stack of books, and he said, this is my Guru Dev's book. It proves that Lord Shiva is the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita. And you guys have it all wrong. I said, oh, okay. I said, what do you want me to do with these books? He said, I want you to give it to all your devotees so that they get the right information. I said, okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much. And he left. And as soon as he left, I threw it in the garbage, all those books. Because not only he is garbage, his guru is garbage, and the book is garbage. Because anything that is different than what Krishna says is garbage. Right? So now how can you prove that Krishna is the speaker of Bhagavad Gita? Well, what's his name? Sanjaya confirms it. He says in the 18th chapter, he said it all throughout the whole Bhagavad Gita, but 18th chapter especially, it says, by the mercy, 18th chapter, 75th verse, by the mercy of Vyasa, I have heard these most confidential talks directly from the master of all mysticism, Krishna, who was speaking personally to Arjuna. Now, does he mention Shiva? No. He mentions Krishna, right? And then he says, O king, as I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I take pleasure, being thrilled at every moment. That's verse number 1876. Did he say this holy dialogue between Shiva and Arjuna? No. And then again he says, Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishno, Yatra Partha Dhanurdara, Tatra Shiva Jayo Bhutir Dhruvam Nitir Matir Mama. Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. So did he say, wherever there is Shiva, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme? No. So how does this person and his guru come up with the idea that Lord Shiva spoke the Bhagavad Gita and not Krishna? You see, these are all made up, bogus statements by people who are envious of Krishna and have no real knowledge of Shastra. They just make something up, and because they say it emphatically, dumb people believe it. But actually, we have to always refer to the original Shastra. So therefore, Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhupada says, is the it's like the quintessential Shastra, and it contains all the essential truths required for one to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. And he says in the second chapter, verse number 63, let's see. He says, no, that's not the verse. Okay, anyway, in another verse, he says that Bhagavad Gita is the best of all the Vedic literatures. So Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which is further elaboration of all the themes in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, next, in the 13th chapter, 21st and 22nd verse, there is further information about the creation of the material world. Now, we've gone over this verse 13:21 before, but I want to go over it again because it's of utmost importance, and then 13:22. It says, nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. Well, today we read, in material existence, therefore, the material energy is seemingly the mother of the living entities, and the Lord is the father. When, however, the animation takes place, the living entities revive their own natural activities under the spell of time and energy, and thus the varieties of living beings are manifested. The Lord, therefore, is ultimately the cause of all animation in the material world. Okay, now, why did I read these two? One is the verse 13:21, and the other is the verse we read today. Well, we'll see. It says in the purport of 13:21, the different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature. In other words, the body and the senses are due to material nature. There are 8,400,000 different species of life, and these varieties are creations of the material nature. They arise from the different sensual pleasures of the living entity, who thus desires to live in this body or that body. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. His material happiness and distress are due to his body, and not to himself as he is. Okay, now why does it say that? Because not to himself as he is actually means that we are a spiritual soul. That's our real identity. And our soul is part and parcel of Krishna. That's explained in the 15th chapter, 7th verse. Mamayavam sa jiva loka jiva bhuta sanatana. We're eternally the spiritual spark or the part and parcel of Krishna. That's who we really are. We're not the body. The body, material body, is always changing. The spiritual body of the is never changing. It's eternal. It's eternal in the past, eternal in the present, eternal in the future. So then it says, in his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. So that means this material enjoyment is not really enjoyment. It is a curse that keeps people in the material world. And it's basically simply the temporary relief of suffering, which is considered to be enjoyment, but it's not real enjoyment. Whereas in the soul, there is real enjoyment, and it's not beginning and ending. It's eternal. It's always been there. It's there now, and it's there in the future. So there's a difference between enjoyment in the real state of the living entity as pure soul in relationship to Krishna, and in enjoyment in the material body using the senses for sense gratification. There's a major difference between the two. They're not equal. And the material sense gratification is not really enjoyment. It's just temporary relief of suffering. Okay, so that's what's called enjoyment. Therefore, it says, his material happiness and distress are due to his body and not to himself as he is. Because the soul does not have to eat, does not have to sleep, does not have to reproduce. It is completely different than the body, which is forced to eat, sleep, mate, defend, and so forth. So this is not understood by people. Most people never understand the difference between the soul and the body, and they think that they're only the body, and therefore the body is subject to the laws of material nature, which is one of the laws is birth, old age, disease, and death. So people consider this as normal. You were born, you grow, you stay for some time, you give off byproducts like children, you dwindle, and you die. And they think this is normal. It's not normal. It has nothing to do with the soul. It's only the body which is being forced to do these things by the laws of material nature that were established by Krishna. Okay, so his material happiness and distress are due to his body and not to himself as he is. In his original state, there's no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. In other words, Anandamaya Vyasat is the nature of the soul. It's full of natural bliss and ecstasies. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he, meaning the living entity or she, is in the material world. In the spiritual world, there's no such thing. In other words, what is it referring to? There's no such thing. The desire to lord it over material nature. It doesn't exist in the spiritual world. Everyone is satisfied serving Krishna in the spiritual world. But when a person becomes dissatisfied, they're put into the material world to try and act like a god, dominating and exploiting material nature for their own sense gratification. In other words, they try and imitate Krishna as the enjoyer. The spiritual world is pure, but in the material world, everyone is struggling hard to acquire different kinds of pleasures for the body. That's a fact. It might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses. The senses are instruments for gratifying desire. Now the sum total, body and instrument senses, are offered by material nature, as will be clear in the next verse. The living entity is blessed or damned with circumstances according to his past desire and activity. According to one's desire. So now, first of all, the Christians say there's no such thing as past desires and activity. You're only born once, and you die once, and that's it. So that's a mistake, right? It's a glaring mistake. And the Christians also depict God as an old man with a white beard and wrinkles. If you go to the Sistine Chapel in Rome, which is the center of Catholicism, and you'll see the depiction of God painted by Michelangelo under the tutelage or under the direction of the Pope. The Pope told him what God looks like. That's what he painted, an old man with a beard and wrinkles. That's another mistake. Krishna is Navayovanam cha. He's always a fresh youth. He never grows old. He's not subject, Krishna's body is not subject to the laws of material nature. Our bodies are subject to the laws of material nature. So, therefore, we're born, we stay, we grow, we stay, we give off byproducts, we dwindle, and we die. That's the laws of nature, which is acting on our body. But most people never can differentiate between the body and the soul, and therefore they are forced by nature to do things, eat, sleep, mate, and defend. They're not independent at all. And so now this is going to be explained in more detail. So therefore it says, according to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters, meaning different types of bodies. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. So, material nature seems to be the cause of material causes and effects, but the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So, when we come to this world, our soul is covered by a material body. The material body acts according to the laws of nature. Birth, death, old age, and disease, and so many other laws. And we've gone over them before. There are many laws of nature. For example, if you engage in sense gratification, it will be followed by material suffering. That's a law of nature. And there are many other laws. Okay, so everything, therefore, depends on our desire and activity. Already, what we are now was due to our previous desire and activity. What we will be in the future is also going to be determined by what are our desires and activity. Therefore, material education is extremely dangerous because it teaches people to desire materially and to enjoy sense gratification as the purpose of life. Therefore, it's totally misleading, and it's guaranteeing that we'll continue in the cycle of birth and death. That's why we should reject modern education. If we don't, then subtly we will be conditioned to stay in the material world. Then it says, the being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. So the decisions we make today, like for example, someone would say, I'm not going to go to the temple this morning for Mangala Aarti, or I might go to the temple for Mangala Aarti, but I'm not going to listen to the class. Or I might go to the temple, I might not go to the temple at all, I'll just sleep in, right? So that's a decision that a person makes, right? And based on decisions like that, they become entangled in the material world by lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion, and envy. And they're forced to do things, eat, sleep, mate, and defend. So, if they eat, sleep, mate, and defend for sense gratification, they remain in the material world, birth after birth. If they eat, sleep, mate, and defend according to Krishna's instructions and chant Hare Krishna, they can be liberated, even in this lifetime, from repeated birth and death. It all depends on our desire. Now, to build up our desire for spiritual emancipation, it's absolutely necessary to regularly hear every day this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, there's no other hope. You don't do it by seeing a movie about Krishna consciousness. Okay, it's nice, but movies are all entertainment. They don't actually change your life. People say, oh, this movie was so good, and it changed my life. No, it doesn't really change your life. But regular hearing and repeating and discussing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, that changes one's life. Right? So once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature, because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. At that time, the living entity has no power to change that law. Suppose an entity is put into the body of a dog. As soon as he is put into the body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to his body. This is the law of nature. But in all circumstances, the super soul is with the individual soul. That is explained in the Vedas, in the Mundaka Upanishad. There's the Mandaka and the Mundaka, two different Upanishads. 3.1.1 as follows: Dwa Suparna Sayuja Sakaya. The Supreme Lord is so kind upon the living entity that he always accompanies the individual soul, and in all circumstances is present as the super soul or Paramatma. So, what is the super soul or Paramatma? It is Upadasthana Mantra Cha Bharta Bhukta Maheshwara Paramatma Deep Chapi Yukte Dehesmin Purushak Para. Yet in this body there's another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. So Krishna is in our heart. He knows everything we think, everything we desire, every action we perform, and is waiting to see that we do these three things according to his instructions. And if we don't, he permits us to go deeper and deeper into entanglement and repeated birth and death. So everything depends on our desire. And to develop the desire to be Krishna conscious, the only way that happens, and now we're going to hear that, is by hearing regularly Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is explained in 13.22, where it says, the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. So, as long as we are under the influence of the three modes of material nature, we are going to experience some things that are good, some things that are bad. Both are Maya, the good things and the bad things. Like, for example, someone might think, oh, I hit the lottery. That's my good karma. And then he gets all of a sudden all this money, and he gets fame and notoriety, and everyone's calling him up and congratulating him and asking if they can loan them some money. They've got a great way of making more money. And so many people who win the lottery, it ruins their life. There was one nun in New Jersey, she won the lottery, right? And she won millions of dollars. She gave it all to the nunnery. She didn't keep one penny for herself. She didn't change her lifestyle. So that was a good thing. I mean, it doesn't mean it's perfect, but it was actually very wise of her. You know, she didn't start buying nice clothes and high heels and nylon stockings and perfumes and jewelry and makeup and Botox. And no, she gave all the money to the nunnery. It didn't change her lifestyle, right? That's a true story. But most people, they say, well, I'm going to buy my mom and dad a new house, and I'm going to buy myself a new car, and I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to just lay around and enjoy. It ruins their life. And it attracts many, many low-class people who offer them opportunities to make more money, you know, and basically cheat them. So, in 13.22 it says, the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with the material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Prabhupada says this verse is very important for understanding of how the living entities transmigrate from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another, just as one changes dress. Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yavanam jara. This change of dress or change of body is due to his attachment to material existence. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation called the material world, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Now, what is false about this material creation? It's developing the idea that the purpose of the material creation is sense gratification. Just like I told you the story of this priest I used to live with when I was a student. And he told me, if you don't enjoy this world, you won't be able to enjoy the spiritual world. Now this is nonsense philosophy, right? And he fell down later on as a priest, and he got married, and he started some business, and gave up being a priest, although he was a bishop, right? He had a high position. So we see that the attraction to sense gratification in the material world is bondage. It keeps us as a prisoner. But this is the whole theme of modern education. Enjoying. Just like people say, enjoy, and, have a good time, going to Disneyland. Have a good time, enjoy, say hello to Mickey for me, and Donald, So this is all nonsense, but this is what people, they regularly say, enjoy. You ever hear that? Enjoy. That's the whole idea of material education. And then here it says, due to his or her desire to lord it over material nature, he or she is put into such undesirable circumstances. That means take birth as a dog, or a pig, or a rat, or a human being, and you try to enjoy. Under the influence of material desire, the entity is born sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a beast, as a bird, as a worm, as an aquatic, as a saintly man, or as a bug. This is going on. And in all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances, yet he is under the influence of material nature. So we think we're independent. And some dog thinks, that he is, he is powerful and he can protect his master, keeping people away from the house. And the snake thinks that it can go into a mouse's hole and eat the mouse because he's a snake and it's his right to eat that mouse, and so forth. This big fish is always eating the little fish, and the little fish is eating smaller fish, and so forth. So it's all about control and sense gratification. That's the whole theme of material nature. So one has to, how he is put into such different bodies is explained. Here, it is due to association with the different modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. One has to rise, therefore, above the three material modes and become situated in the transcendental position. The only way to do that, there's no other way, the only way to do that is through Krishna consciousness. That is called Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. That change can be effected only by hearing from authorities or hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna. the living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature. And gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. In the Vedic mantra, it is said that as he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. This is extremely important. Second paragraph of this purport. Extremely important. And he doesn't say that this change of conception can be affected only by going on parikram. No. Or getting your bhakti shastri. No. It says this change can be affected only by hearing from authoritative sources, and it means regular hearing every day. And Prabhupada wanted it to be 3 times a day. We're doing it maybe once a day, but he wanted it 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening, because our disease is forgetfulness. As soon as we leave the class, we forget most of what we heard. That's our disease. So therefore, he wanted it to be morning, afternoon, and evening. And okay, so these 2 verses, 13, 21, and 22, are extremely important if we want to understand what is our position and how we can get out of this position of being completely enslaved by material illusion and being under the influence of the modes of material nature. Now, this is a major theme in Bhagavad Gita, because in the 2nd chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna that he should rise above the modes of material nature. He says clearly, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjana, Nirdvandva Nitya Sattvasto, Niryoga Shema Atmavan. He says, the Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the 3 modes of material nature, O Arjuna. Become transcendental to these 3 modes. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So he's telling Arjuna, rise above the 3 modes of material nature, and rise above even the study of the Vedas, because they just basically deal with the 3 modes. You have to come to the transcendental state, which is Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, where there's no more entanglement by the 3 modes of material nature, because one is engaged in devotional service, which is transcendental to the 3 modes of material nature. And Prabhupada writes, all material activities involve actions and reactions in the 3 modes of material nature. That means all material activities, not spiritual activities. They are meant for fruitive results. In other words, people who start a business is to make money. And why do they want money? Because they want to have sustained sense gratification. They are meant for fruitive results, which cause bondage in the material world. Yeah, the more things you acquire, the more things bind you for maintaining them. And you're spending time, ordering this part for repairing your car, or ordering this part for repairing your washing machine, or ordering a new pair of glasses because you broke the glasses, or ordering more, or getting laser surgery to improve your eyesight, or to do this or to do that. You always have to get some parts to replace things that have been broken. And things are breaking all the time. Windows break. You lose a key. You lose the key to your car. You have to spend a couple $100 and change the lock in your car and get a new key. Or your alternator breaks. You have to get a new alternator and have it installed. Or you have a terrible toothache. You have to go to the dentist to get the tooth pulled. Then you have to go back to the dentist to get another tooth put in place of it, right? This is going on. This maintenance drives people crazy because nothing is permanent in the material world. So whatever gadgets we buy, everything starts out like ecstasy and ends up like misery. Right? Okay, so then it says, the Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. In other words, it's just like the carrot that you put in front of the donkey. You get a branch, some branch of a wood, of a tree, and you get a string. Then you tie a carrot to the string and tie the string to the branch, and you hold the branch, and the donkey sees the carrot, but it's always a little farther ahead, and therefore it starts walking to get the carrot, and that way you make the donkey go in this the direction or that direction. So in the same way, that carrot is sense gratification, and there's so many varieties of it. You can see in through advertisement all the different varieties of sense gratification that are being offered. And this is what makes us keep going in the cycle of birth and death. Just like some people get married 4 or 5 times in their lifetime. Elizabeth Taylor, I think, got married 13 times. Right? And every time they get married, it's a honeymoon, and there's the I love yous and the kisses and the hugs and all that stuff. So, if you only get married once, all that honeymoon, it only lasts for a couple of months, and then the rest of it is usually misery. But if you get married many times, so you're having the honeymoon over and over again. So that's why they do that. You get tired of someone, so you reject them and get married to someone else. And it's like a new leaf on sense gratification. But it's all sense gratification. See? And it's very interesting. I'll end with this one thing. We're going to read in a couple verses something very interesting. So we're on verse 34. But when we go to chapter 6, there's a very interesting verse that says... let's see. Okay, I'll discuss this tomorrow because it's getting late. But it's extremely interesting point that Prabhupada makes. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? Yes. What? Yes, material desires. A material desire is the cause of our remaining in the cycle of birth and death. No, and we're talking about material desires. Spiritual desires are different. Spiritual desires are not based on dominating and controlling material nature for sense gratification. Spiritual desires are to please Krishna. So there's a difference between spiritual desires and material desires. So when we say desire is the cause of bondage, it's material desires. But spiritual desires are the cause of liberation. Okay? You can't live without desires. That's a fact. That's why Mayavadis fall down. They try and deny all desires. Right? And even if they attain liberation in Brahman, they'll fall down eventually. Because you cannot be desireless. You cannot be a non-person because you're eternally a person. You can try and be a non-person by artificially controlling yourself, but eventually you will desire something and fall down. A famous example is Sobari. Sobari was a very powerful mystic yogi. He was meditating underwater for 10,000 years. 10,000 years. But one day, a spool or a whole bunch of fish were swimming around him, and they were reproducing, or they were engaged in reproduction. And somehow or other, he perceived it, and it broke his meditation, and he had to scramble to get up to the surface, otherwise he would have drowned. And then when he got out of the water, his body was covered with algae, and he smelled like a fish. He didn't look nice at all, right? But he went to see a king and immediately demanded to marry the king's young daughter and have all her maidservants also as his wife. So he went from meditating severely for 10,000 years to becoming a Vishayi, a sense gratifier, right? So, yeah, you cannot live without desires. But there's a difference between material desires and spiritual desires. Yeah, we've read this already. Yeah. Yeah, desire to serve Krishna is real desirelessness. It's also in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse number 72. Vihaya kamam yasarvam pumam charati nishvaha nirmamo nirahankara sasantim adigachati, which says, a person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, meaning material desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. So in the purport it says, to become desireless means not to desire anything for sense gratification. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna conscious is actually desirelessness. There you are. Okay? Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Haribol.